Okay, добрий день всім. Good afternoon. My name is Angus Aitken, and it's a privilege to moderate this critical discussion on environmental recovery and climate resilient development in Ukraine, a subject which I'm sure you can agree has implications far beyond the borders of Ukraine. And as we meet today, we're counting not just the military and human cost of the war, but we're also counting the environmental cost of the war. As I speak, the war has cost the Ukrainian national environment 62 billion US dollars in destruction, and that spans from polluted rivers, burnt forests, and mined landscapes. Notably, 75,000 wildlife specimens have been destroyed. You've got up to 30% of Ukraine's landmass having been potentially mined, and 80,000 hectares of forest burnt down, and 1.4 million tons of wasted Russian military equipment polluting the landscape. Yet, amidst this devastation, there is also a glimmer and a blueprint for hope, looking at how ecosystem restoration can foster lasting peace, and also the war in Ukraine providing the backdrop for the concept of ecocide gaining significant traction. The war offers us the opportunity of understanding how ecocide and climate justice can hold perpetrators to account. This is a discussion that Ukraine and indeed the world cannot afford to overlook. So to start off, we have the privilege and the honor to hear from Ambassador Baket Dusupov from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Ambassador Dusupov brings a wealth of experience in diplomatic efforts aimed at fostering stability and peace across regions marked by conflict. He's got a distinguished career addressing complex geographical challenges, and his insights on international cooperation and environmental strategies can underpin peace building, and they are invaluable to today's discussions. Ambassador Dusupov, we look forward to hearing your perspective on how nature-based solutions can contribute to resilience and dialogue in a post-conflict Ukraine. Over to you.
Thank you very much. First of all, at the outset, I would like to thank organizers for the invitation to speak at this side event and maybe inform the audience on the activities of the OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, to address this challenge. Always. Do you hear me? Now it's fine. OSCE has recognized the link between environment and security back in our founding document in the Helsinki Final Act, and more precisely in 2007 Ministerial Council Declaration, when OSCE participating states, 57 OSCE participating states, urged to improve cooperation, to improve the sustainable use of the environmental resources, namely food, soil, forests, and biodiversity. And lately in 2021, Ministerial Council decision in Stockholm also was adopted, which was the aim of to strengthen the cooperation between the participating states on the challenges caused by the climate, by the changing climate. Here in the OSCE, of course, we support our Ukrainian friends to assess and address the most pressing challenges caused by the war against Ukraine. And I would like to bring some of the examples on the activities which we are implementing in this regard. First, we at the OSCE, my office of the Coordinator of Economic and Environmental Activities, initiated a project on assessment of the impacts of the war against Ukraine and options for remediation. This project was launched with the support of the donor countries back in October 2022. This year, we released the summary of the assessment of the impacts of the war. For 1 year, it was 1 year assessment, and this year we have released the summary. We have done this work jointly with our implementing partners, Conflict and Environmental Observer, ZEOPS, ZOE Environment Network, who mapped out the environmental degradation, the impacts of the war, the hotspots in this regard, and we offered some options for remediation and recovery. What will be the next on this project is now we will address more broadly on the thematic briefs, namely water-related security impacts, both drinking water and agricultural water, hazardous facilities, and disaster risk preparedness. Of course, capacity building of the Ministry of Environment and other national stakeholders is also the top priority. We are working this, we are doing this job, of course, in complement and also jointly with UN agencies. We are a member of the interagency working group and the environmental assessment of the war. Just recently in June, I had a privilege to participate in the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Berlin, where I also mentioned the high interest of the OSCE to be the part of the action for the green recovery for Ukraine, which was launched by UNECE, UNEP, and OECD. Another issue, of course, you just mentioned about the losses of estimated 62 billion losses. Of course, most of that loss comes to the energy infrastructure. Destruction of the critical energy infrastructure also hinders the Ukraine's ability to enhance green and advancement energy technologies, green energy transition. And here we support with our specific project on the mitigating the impacts of the climate to the energy infrastructure, bringing new technologies, new climate data-based and downscale climate models to transit for the green and advanced energy transition, to bring the sustainable and climate resilience energy technologies in this regard. We implement this project jointly with our donors, and namely our main partner is the United States, Germany, and some other countries. And we also work closely with the US energy departments, Aragon National Laboratory, who brings their technologies and new advanced solutions in this regard. Open data and good economic governance is another aspect where we work. We are implementing the project on the promotion of the good governance by the use of digitalization and open data. We support national stakeholders of Ukraine with this XB project, which is launched for this last 2 years. And last but not least, I would like to mention that OSCE is on the ground. OSCE is working with Ukraine for this last 30 years. Lately, in November 2022, with support of the 33 participating states, we have launched an extra budgetary project on support program for Ukraine. And based on our human capital, based on our knowledge, based on the needs, and based on the commitments of the OSCE to support Ukraine, we are implementing a number of projects on the ground jointly with Ukrainian national stakeholders. I will stop here and I will thank you.
Ambassador, thank you so much for explaining OSCE's crucial work in supporting Ukraine, particularly at the nexus between the environment and security. Now, we've got a very esteemed and eclectic group of panelists here that I want to introduce you to. So rather than doing just a normal who are you and where do you come from? I want to instead ask the question, why have you chosen to be part of this conversation today? And what compels you about the intersection of environmental recovery and peace building? So we'll start with Jan.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thanks for the warm introduction and having me here. My name is Jan Peters. I'm the director of the Michael Zucker Foundation, which is one of the partners in the Greifswald-Meyer Center from Northeastern Germany. And I'm here today because we are working already for many, many years, already pre-war, together with Ukraine on protecting, conserving, and also restoring peatlands, organic soils in the country, but also working on protected area management, especially when it comes to biosphere reserves. And yeah, I would like to contribute a little bit the views, perspectives, why peatlands matter in Europe, and especially also in the situation at the moment in Ukraine, and what peatland and the use of peatlands could actually contribute to green recovery as well.
Thank you. My name is Renata Kazak. I'm a representative of academia. I'm a lecturer at Linköping University and part of the Mr. Geopolitics program that covers the intersection between all geopolitical problems and climate change. But after the war started, as I'm Ukrainian, and I was happy to join their team because now I can develop these major geopolitical issues in a way of through the shift of Russian war in Ukraine and the environmental disaster that is happening now and in ongoing war in Ukraine. I am also the part of Formas project in Sweden. And for the next 3 years, I will be exploring ecocide, specifically its drivers and barriers of its implementation, and how can it be used to restore nature, to make the perpetrators accountable for this, and probably for the peace building efforts. So that's why I'm here, and it would be very great to contribute to the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure for me to be here as well. It's an honor to be part of the Ukrainian pavilion. My name is Till Reinholz. I'm working at the Interdisciplinary Center for Baltic Sea Region Research and the Institute for Climate Protection, Energy and Mobility in Berlin. And by applying a comparative law approach, I'm assessing multidimensional challenges. And one of the key questions is, how could we learn from each other if we look beyond our own borders? And I think Ukraine is showcasing many deep transitions at once, especially under huge pressure, under wartime. And I think the topics of nature restoration and carbon dioxide management are crucial in reaching our climate and biodiversity targets. And I think both the European Union, as one of my main research focus, and Ukraine can learn from each other. And I am delighted to be here and to talk about this with you.
Thank you again, and it's a pleasure to be here at the Ukrainian Pavilion. My name is Jody Braga. I'm the co-founder of Teles Conservation and the chairman of the Nature Fund of Ukraine. Since the invasion, we've provided up to 9 million euros in direct financing to support 10 national parks across the country. The reason why is sadly from learned experience. In my previous life, I served as a military officer, and I saw firsthand how environmental destruction in countries such as Afghanistan and Somalia have really hindered the ability for countries to prosper post-conflict. And that was the thinking and the thesis behind our program in the country, to be able to support Ukraine's national parks to ensure that they can thrive post-victory. So it's a real pleasure to be here today and join this conversation.
First of all, welcome everyone in Ukraine's Pavilion. And I'm one of those who have been standing behind creating this space where we have been talking a lot for more than a week about the environmental consequences of war, about Ukraine, but not only about the destruction, but about hope. My name is Evgenia Kapitsa, and I'm an associate professor of environmental climate and energy law, initially in Yaroslav Mudry National Law University, Kharkiv, Ukraine. But when the full Russian-scale invasion started, my journey started as well. And I have been supported by so many people on my journey from Ukraine, currently continuing research with a number of fantastic initiatives. And what I have found, we can't do anything alone. So thank you very much. It's not the closing remarks, but the opening one. Thank you very much for every single you who have come to Ukraine's pavilion and who are here to talk about Ukraine. And once we have this collaborative action, once we have great people that are supporting us, Ukrainian academics, Ukrainian policymakers, Ukrainian diverse stakeholders, we have the hope, but not only the hope for Ukraine, but I have the hope for the whole world, because climate action is a collective obligation. So I'm looking forward to these fruitful discussions and how we can come up with the best innovative solutions for Ukraine. But again, using Ukraine as the case study, that any kind of research, what you are doing here, it's something that we should use to enable peace, security, and peace. Thanks.
Thank you, Yevgenia. I now want to move over to Ina, who's joining us online. Ina, I hope you can hear us, and maybe you can answer this question about what has brought you to this conversation. Over to you.
Warm greetings from Ukraine. My name is Ina Hoch. I am National Technical Analyst working for UNDP Ukraine, precisely to a conservation project which is on place even in such complex circumstances in Ukraine. And I'm here to stress the importance of conservation projects like ours. And I here to stress that it's never late to do something good for nature, even in times of the war, actually. Also, I would like to emphasize the new approach for sustainable agriculture here on this panel, and stress the importance of such measures in Ukraine. I'm happy to be invited in this important discussion, also to raise the issue of synergy among different organizations which are working on the same field, in field on conservation, among organizations like non-governmental, governmental, international, national organization. It's very important. So thank you very much for the invitation. I am looking forward to very fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ina. And actually, something you just said there sparks my next question, which is about timing. And I really want to put it to the panelists about why we should be talking about climate and nature at this time now, at a time when there's an existential threat to Ukraine from Russia's invasion. Why are we talking about this now? So whoever would like to answer this question.
Thank you for this question. And I think from a legal perspective, it's crucial that we're talking about it right now, because implementation processes need a long time. We can observe a process from strategies to legal implementation later on. And we have stakeholder dialogues and many things, because we need to assess many dimensions, ecological, social ones. And therefore, we should have started talking about it yesterday, but today is better than tomorrow.
Yeah, I will continue Tilly's words, because I'm also a lawyer, also with a legal background. That's why maybe for the lawyers it's more obvious why it's now, because we know how long could it take to really make an actions to implement some legal directives into law, and especially into the international law. So it's a one point. The second point, because especially like for my topic, as my focus is on ecocide, of course it's obvious that Russia-Ukraine war became the momentum for exploring this conception. And what is also like very interesting to trace is that a few months ago in September, Vanuatu, Fiji, and Samoa, small island states in Pacific, they proposed already to the ICC, International Criminal Court in The Hague, to add ecocide as a fifth crime into the Rome Statute. But still it will be the peacetime ecocide in a way, because it won't include the military actions, because they have their own problem. They have now currently ongoing ecocide due to the climate change. And we here, not here in Ukraine, but like, okay, in Pavilion, we in Ukraine have the wartime ecocide. That's why this mission, why it's now, because it's a momentum to compare these two concepts and to analyze it more for the future peace building, not only in Ukraine or on the small island states, but globally.
I think my response is quite simple, is why not now? I'm coming from a private sector perspective. I run an organization that restores landscapes at scale for market-based investment. And right now we see a huge amount of investor sentiment in support of Ukraine. And we have investors who are lining up to be able to invest in these projects because they have seen time and time again how Ukraine is resilient and can run projects even during the darkest days of the conflict. I look at many private sector organizations when I spend time in the country. Every day we see over 500 Glovo delivery drivers waking up and delivering food across multiple Ukrainian cities, even during air raid sirens. And so you ask yourself the question, if that can happen, why shouldn't we be looking at private sector investment into Ukraine's nature space at the moment? Why should it be a nice to have at a time when Ukraine shouldn't we be making it happen? Because we can, and it is possible even during a full-scale illegal invasion.
Thank you very much. I want to spark on something that Renata said there about ecocide and, and really use that to explore the theme of climate-focused environmental peace building. So Renata, I know that this is your speciality. So how does the concept of ecocide, and maybe you can do a bit to educate our already knowledgeable audience, but further educate them on what exactly that is, and how does it fit in to peace building discussions? And does its criminalization help in efforts to prevent future conflict?
Thank you for the question, and thank you, in fact, for starting this discussion from the ecocide, because it's now on the top of discussions in all like part of the world. But as I told that I'm from academia, that's why I can start answering a little bit theoretically. What is ecocide in whole? So it appeared in 1970. Of course, I guess that it appeared like long before, but in 1970, it was first coined as the word ecocide at the Stockholm conference in 1972 by the Swedish Prime Minister. And it makes like literally translation, in fact, for those like who are not acquainted with the ecocide at all, but maybe I don't know, you know Latin. So this is two parts of the words. It's eco and sidere. So from Latin, it's like literally killing nature. That's it. That's what covers this concept. If you are killing nature with the intention of killing nature, and it is the biggest problem of prosecution of ecocide. Because you need to have an evidence of intention, and it's quite hard. So, but then this discussion stopped in 90s a bit, and then arose again. And in 2021, so only like 4 years ago, like 3 years ago, it was firstly and like finally, the international expert group of Stop Ecocide Foundation, they finally managed to come up with a definition of ecocide, but still, even like even now, even 3 years later, it raises a lot of questions because this definition consists such terms that cannot be very like legal in a way, or can be very hard to prove. For instance, ecocide is a killing of nature, ecocidere, as I told. If it is widespread, long-term intent, so widespread, what does it mean? Is it like killing nature in Ukraine and the blowing of Kakhovka dam is it ecocide or it's still small one? Or like doing, I don't know, like the deforestation in one zone, in one area of the city, is it ecocide? So there are a lot of problems still in a legal way to explore. But I see ecocide and addressing ecocide as a peace building tool. And why is it so? Like some historical background, very short, because my background is legal history. That's why, of course, I want to share a lot of legal examples, historical. But I would say just like some examples that you probably heard, of course. So it's Vietnam War and Agent Orange that was used. It's a pesticide that further come to this long-term consequences for the health. So not only for environment, but for the health of people. Then the second, it's, for instance, the Aral Sea disaster. So it was the biggest inside sea all over the world, in between of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. But the mismanagement of Soviet Union, it was in 1960s, led that it doesn't exist now, like at all. Because they wanted to produce more cotton, more rice, and to have this economic benefits. And so it killed all the ecosystem. And in fact, it came up to the, sorry. Yeah, well, it was me, sorry. Yeah, so it led, in fact, to the economic prosperity sort of in this region, and still the cotton is 14% of the GDP of Uzbekistan. But it is a big disaster. And one more, it's Nigerian oil spills, for instance, as 13 million of barrel of oil was split it into the delta of Niger River, and it also led to the killing of nature, to the deaths of people, and to the health problems. And what is more important, to the displacement. So we can see here that ecocide is not only like this killing of nature from Latin, it's so huge amount of social problems, displacement, migration, health, long-term issues. That's why I really believe that addressing ecocide in an international level can bring us this like peace building in a way that it literally has to be, to build peace, to build prosperity at the global scale.
Thanks, Renata. Ambassador, I want to ask you from a diplomatic perspective and looking ahead to the future, what role you can envision environmental peace building, management of natural resources, nature-based solutions in fostering that dialogue and stability, either in bringing about peace or in a post-conflict region, looking into the future for Ukraine.
Thank you very much. And again, responding to the previous question, of course, not exactly on the ecocide, the OSCE, not dealing with that issue, but the mandate of the OSCE is to address the environmental challenges which are facing the 57 participating states. And in this case, as I initially in my opening remarks mentioned, the issues of assessment of the impacts of the war is very much crucial, which we are implementing. And now that project also goes very deeply into thematic briefs, disaster risk preparedness, water security related impacts, or the hazardous facilities. We are working jointly with our support program in Ukraine, with our extra budgetary mission there, and they are also implementing some of the projects related to humanitarian demanding, some of the projects related to the use of the chemicals. When it comes to the peace building issues, of course, OSCE with 50 years of experience, we have all the tools, all the models on that with the comprehensive security approach. we have 3 dimensions: political, military, economic, and environment, on which I'm responsible for, and human rights. We try to bring this comprehensive security approach in the cooperation in providing political platform for all 57 participating states. But here, trust and confidence is very much crucial. Unfortunately, at this stage, we are lacking of trust and confidence. But OSCE, with all the tools which we have, we are trying to bring there. We are trying to discuss those issues, and we are trying to find some, maybe in some cases, some of the unified agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Ambassador. Moving on from notions of peace building, I want to explore this idea of the practical steps that can be taken with nature-based solutions to mitigate and adapt to climate change, either during the current conflict or in a post-conflict Ukraine. And so to Jan, I wanted to explore what role peatlands play in mitigating those direct environmental impacts of war, such as pollution and deforestation.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I'm very glad that I have the opportunity to zoom in a bit into peatland ecosystems, which are quite often overlooked, because when you look at the land area, they only contribute to 1.5 million hectares compared to around 20 million hectares of forest. But actually they are probably one of the biggest carbon stores in Ukraine, as 1 hectare of peatland can actually store 6 times the amount of carbon which 1 hectare of forest can store. So they have incredible amount of carbon stored in their ground, but not only carbon. And here it comes to why it is very important to restore and to re-wet these lands, which are quite often drained, because they can also act as sponges. Yeah, they can keep water, they can purify water. So, for example, the upriver areas of the Dnieper River, which supplies Kiev and other cities with water, is like full of peatlands, the Polessia region, and many of these peatlands are actually drained. And so it's actually our need not only for the carbon balance, but also for water supply and water quality to restore these lands. And then when it comes to also strategic considerations, these peatlands are mostly located at the northern border of Ukraine, and heavy machinery, also military machinery, cannot cross wet peatlands. So because they are too swampy, the soil is too soft, so they will actually stop the invasions from the northern borders and give opportunities for new land use options. And I think that Ina can talk about that more later.
Thanks, Jan. Yeah, I have been in the north of Ukraine and heard directly from national park directors that those peatlands and wetlands are the world's largest natural tank trap. So they certainly see them as an asset, not just for biodiversity, but for keeping potential invaders out. As ever, when we talk about practical steps, it's always good to hear from the ground. So that seems like the perfect segue to go to Ina, who is calling us in from Ukraine, and really just wanting to hear more about the work that you're doing, with the Jeff in UNDP project on ecosystem restoration.
Yes, I would like to say a few words about our project. I can talk about our project for long, but taking into account the limited time, I would like to mention just main goal of our GF UNDP project. There is to improve the land management in northern part of Ukraine, in 7 oblasts of Ukraine, where the highest concentration of organic soil still exists. Among the project activity directly linked to the topic of this panel and to the COP agenda, generally I can list the following. First of all, we are in the process of peatland inventory. Last inventory was not done since 90s from Soviet times, and it's really pity. Our work will provide a basis for the national policy of peatland management. Also, we are in the process of developing of monitoring, reporting, and verification protocol to assess GHGs emission from peatlands. This is also very important, and this exercise will support national reporting to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. What about our next steps in this direction? We will contribute to install a covariance system or another field-based GHG monitoring approach to gather precise data about GHG fluxes from peatlands. And also the very big part of our work will be focused on close collaboration with the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Nature Resources to develop a resolution on the specific of the legal regime for the use of peatlands, as it foreseen in the Land Code of Ukraine. And also, last but not least, in a partnership with the Mikhail Zhukov Foundation, as Jan said, our team created a polyculture compendium. This is very first methodology for cultivating crops on revetted or intact peatlands. I saw that Jan held in his hands the primary book. Yes, this is a very important step forward to introduce paludiculture, this sustainable method how to grow plants and animals on revetted peatlands. The main knowledge introduced in this book came from England and Wales, but the compendium was tailored to Ukraine's unique political, social, and economic challenges. And we strongly believe that this methodology will offer practical solutions to farmers. And also, if I would like to talk a bit about why it is important. It's about resilience. Such sustainable agriculture practices, it's about resilience of rural communities and their economies, even in these times of uncertainty. I believe that projects like ours supports and will support both environmental recovery and community stability. So that's from my side.
So much, Ina. I want to, as we're talking about peatland and wetland restoration, I want to touch on some of the trade-offs that perhaps there are between re-wetting peatlands and the fact that Ukraine's agricultural industry needs to get back up on its feet after such disruption during the war. I don't know, Jan, do you want to touch on some of the trade-offs that you found in your work?
Yeah, of course. Many of these lands, as Ina already said, are managed in drainage-based agriculture by the local communities, by the municipalities there. So they actually need the land and the agricultural use of these lands for their livelihoods. But on the other side, we also see that actually the costs are rising because many of these areas needs to be pumped. These pumps, they use a lot of fuel, electricity, which is scarce at the moment. And also the maintenance of these pumps is very costly. So this paludiculture, which Ina proposed, is actually an option to phase down this pumping, this drainage, this maintenance to restore, re-wet, and then use actually the commodities produced under these wet land use for example, for green sustainable construction materials. So in Germany at the moment, we are working with big companies like Strabag or Sto, like big construction material manufacturers who are really interesting to develop these wetland plants into insulation materials, into boards, into something which could be used for construction. And this is actually exactly what Ukraine needs for the future in victory, I think.
Thanks, Jan. And talking about viability, Till, maybe you can touch on how proposed negative emission certification schemes from the European Union are impacting the viability of these peatland schemes.
Thank you very much. And I would like to add to that perspective from a carbon dioxide removal perspective, since there are current discussions on the European level about those certification schemes. So we have the European trading system, ETS, and this is accounting for like positive emissions. So if you're heating, you need to pay for that. But now there are discussions if we create markets, carbon markets for negative emissions. And I think from an economic perspective, this would be a huge step. It's heavily debated. It's not an easy answer, and it won't come before 2026. But I just want to highlight the importance that could be connected to that.
Still. Something that we've witnessed across the spectrum in Ukraine during this war is sort of a level of innovation supercharged by the necessity of the Russian invasion. You can see that in the military tech that's been developed or the digitization of certain government services. And one would expect no less than, even within the realms of conservation and the environment, that innovation has been put to the fore. So I want to ask my co-founder, Jody Braga, what innovative mechanisms can we use for restoration of the environment in Ukraine, particularly focusing in on the private sector and their role to play in this?
Thank you, Angus. This is obviously a topic dear to our hearts. I think quite simply, the private sector is interested in tried and tested methodologies within market-based instruments. So focusing predominantly on how ecosystem restoration projects in Ukraine right now can be used as a way of producing high-quality carbon credits for organizations or even countries to be able to offset their emissions out, scope 2 emissions, anything outside of things they can't decarbonize. And that is investor sentiment that we see time and time again. These projects are tested. They are used by multiple companies. The largest purchasers of carbon credits around the world are companies such as Microsoft, Amazon, Meta. And they are fantastic ways of getting direct investment into conservation projects. Listen, Ukraine has a real problem at the moment. It has a large number of protected areas. It contains 1/3 of Europe's total biodiversity. Over 4 million Ukrainians rely on the ecosystem services that its natural spaces provide to have a functioning agriculture system. We've all probably here felt the impact in our pockets of what happens when Ukraine cannot produce food. And that's can only be exacerbated by ecosystem collapse. These projects are fantastic ways of getting direct private sector investment into being able to stabilize the Ukraine's ecosystems, restore ecosystems at scale. These projects only work really at the 10,000 hectare size. So you're talking about really large scale ecosystem restoration. And they can also bring economic stability and growth into parts of the country that have been devoid of that. Ecosystem restoration projects often happen in rural locations. They are large employers. You need to plant trees back to an ecological natural baseline that employs hundreds of people over the course of 5 to 6 years. You're talking investments up to $10 million for something that size. So these can be fantastic ways of bringing economic growth. But they also help the country's climate resilience as well. We're all here, in case we forgot, because we're working towards limiting degrees over 1.5. And in a country with multiple opportunities at the moment with land, with areas of land that are heavily mined, you can look at ways of making mined land economically productive. And I think that is a really exciting opportunity as we move into the future. To make that happen, there are many barriers. I don't know if I should carry on. The big one in the private sector is risk. And risk for investment is the one thing that will stop this money flowing. Now, there is positive sentiment towards Ukraine. Investors want to support the country, but we need to be able to de-risk that investment. And to do so, we need public-private partnerships. We need governments, we need international financial organizations to be able to guarantee the early stage capital that is put into these projects to ensure that investors feel comfortable to make that commitment. It costs around $800,000 to get a nature-based project from zero ready for implementation financing. It's quite a lot of money for people sitting around this table, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that much money if you think about the scale of the costs of this war. And so how we de-risk it and how we work in a public-private partnership, I think is absolutely critical, including flexible financing and providing cheap money for project developers to be able to get this money flowing as well. The long-term economic returns of these novel things are things that we know will work and benefit the country longer term. I said I got into this because I don't want to see Ukraine suffer the same fate that I saw happen in Somalia on the ground, or I saw happen in Afghanistan, how droughts were used as a recruiting tool for al-Shabaab, how poor environmental planning in the 1960s caused local ethnic violence in Afghanistan. And I think the economic returns through sustainable agriculture, providing that, you know, the backbone of rural Ukrainian economic growth to be able to continue to function, but also looking ahead and seeing how the bridges that have been built between Ukraine and the world by the illegal Russian invasion can foster things like a tourism industry once we have peace. We've all learned more about Ukraine over the last 2.5 years than anyone probably thought. And there's Ukrainians living throughout Europe. We've shared literally broken bread on tables across the European continent. And that sentiment, I think, that has been built between, will see a huge influx and interest in the beautiful Ukrainian countryside. And what a wonderful way of getting people out there. But it's also cost saving as well. I think investing now from the private sector in ecosystem restoration is gonna save billions and billions of dollars further down the line. Every time I go to Ukraine, I'm overwhelmed at the scale of the challenge that country is going to have to face to rebuild back in a green way. But putting the grassroots in now will save you know, billions of dollars down the line. So it makes economic sense, if anything. I'll stop now because I can carry on forever.
Thank you, Jody. I couldn't have put it better myself. I want to focus on this restoration and perhaps how it ties in with the EU. And I don't know if someone wants to answer the question of how these European legal frameworks and things like the nature restoration law can be applied to Ukraine, and how the EU's net zero strategies can also attract that funding to the Ukraine.
So if I may take over. We can see that the European laws, especially the climate neutrality paths and the newly implemented nature restoration law, are target-based laws. They are implementing measures of monitoring, reporting, and verification, MRV measures. And I think those are two really important takeaways that we need to consider when we think about legal design and what we could learn from each other. And in this regard, we can already see that the newly implemented Ukrainian climate law is setting a target for 2050 as well, if I'm not mistaken. So we already have matching targets on the European and Ukrainian level, so that there is like a common development in the same direction. And we can already see strong support from both sides when it comes to climate adaptation strategies working together with each other. And but this is just the first step. So we have our targets that need to be data-based regarding peatlands. We could use the peatland assessment, for instance, which is really important for authorities to use those scientific-based data. But nonetheless, this is just the first step. And then we need to implement it in national strategies. And we have multidimensional challenges to assess. And therefore, much more research is needed, and we need to talk with each other. We need to talk with Ukrainian politicians, with the local communities, because rewetting projects, just to take another example, are realized on a local level by municipalities and authorities. And what we can learn from a top-down approach on a European level, we have those targets, for example, until 2050, 50% of drained peatlands should be rewetted. I'm not sure if it will work out, because now we come to those barriers on local levels, national levels. But I think it's a huge driver that we set concrete targets, because otherwise we are talking about some measures like out of the blue, and we don't know how to implement them, and therefore targets are really important, and data as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Till. We've been discussing how destruction across the board in terms of Ukraine's nature has been widespread. Nowhere is this more apparent than in Ukraine's beautiful national parks. I wonder, Yevgenia, you've been uncharacteristically quiet at the end there. I wonder if you could talk about the role that Ukraine's national parks play as climate resilience hubs and how maybe they can serve as a blueprint for cross-border cooperation.
Thank you very much. I just loved every single panelist of this great and outstanding panel to show that they're smarter than me, because they are and much more experience. But I would possibly frame the answer to this question within the outline of my research, and one of the research questions that I started following since last COP, where the Declaration on Peace, Recovery and Relief was adopted. And the aim of this declaration was about enabling financing to the countries that are conflict affected and fragile states. And this was one of the first international legal documents that were addressing the climate, security and peace nexus. And since then, this year, under the Azerbaijani presidency, we had Peace Day, on the 15th of November. And again, there have not been clear enforceable mechanisms delivered as the result of the declaration. And here we're coming to the loopholes of the UNFCCC regime. Because when we're talking about the international climate regime, and thank you very much, to the ICAM, that is, and IFTU, those who brought this up to my life, when we had the great discussions while preparing for this panel with Professor Rode and with Theo, talking about the loopholes of the international climate regime, because the loopholes are that there are so many things to be addressed, that climate law is actually a very abstract term. And I think when we are talking about the climate regulations, overall, it's mostly about the domestic regimes and domestic regulations that are being taken place. But when we're unzooming it and coming to the UNFCCC, the context of the countries like Ukraine is not properly addressed, because Ukraine is falling under the Annex II countries, which we are the economy in transition. That's why we don't have access to the financial mechanism like loss and damage. And this means that, again, financing, it is the key point that matters the most. And when we're talking about any kind of transition, energy transition, or ensuring peace, or we're talking about peace building, or we're talking about reaching the targets, we should understand that unless it is backed up by the proper financial support, and thank you very much for addressing this, it is not going to work. And we have the political will. Well, the biggest constraint and the biggest constraints is the absence of the political will. But even if we have political will, but we don't have the support of the financial institutions, international corporations, or the private and public partnerships, it won't work. I mean, none of the legal frameworks would work. So coming back to the declaration on peace, relief, and recovery that was adopted at COP28, the great idea was that we accept and acknowledge the importance of peace considerations and security considerations while developing the mechanisms for the countries under the international climate regime. But declarations are not legally binding. And as a legal scholar, we understand that international regime is the great lighthouse that is expected to enable our actions. But everything depends on cooperation, and everything depends on the knowledge exchange and having the right people at the right table. And I think COPs here, it's the exact momentum when we have to bring right people around the right table, bring in legal scholars, practitioners, innovators, businesses, and to make them commit to the development of the proper mechanisms that would be the backup for the best ever legislative frameworks. So here I'm coming back to your question, how can natural parks serve as those tool to enable the green transition and green recovery of Ukraine? Because national parks that are placed on the territories of different countries, the transboundary ones. They are those points that can bring different stakeholders in different countries around the table. So cooperation is that what matters. Like, no matter how great legal framework is, no matter how not great it is, provided the international cooperation that there is, it would have this proper call to action being supported by the proper financial mechanisms, by the proper interested stakeholders. Only in this case, we can ensure that Ukraine has created every single condition for the green recovery and reconstruction, but as well, only in this way, we can ensure that the countries around the world understand the urgency of the action and are ready to pledge to making words work into action.
Thank you so much, Yevgenia. We saved the best until last. I now want to open the debate up to the floor. Please don't be shy. We have an array of specialists from academia to doers to legal scholars. So I'd like to ask if anyone from the floor has a question, and I think I'll give you my microphone for the moment.
Yeah, thank you very much. Fantastic discussions on a really good academic level. I enjoyed. I want to come back to the international framework, because we think we are in a big circus here, but actually we are somehow at a COP. We don't feel it, but it is like this. The UNFCCC mechanism is based on NDCs, basically. It's a fantastic system that you have to report, and then it's transparent, and then step back and so on. So NDCs are everything. And for me, it's very important that we go forward to detail the NDCs. So the process to ask the states for more detailed NDCs, which are then better comparable. So, and my question on this background is regarding this interesting of wetlands and peatlands. How far is it the legislators? What is at the moment? What do states have to report on this, and the discussion go regarding reporting obligations?
Yeah, thanks for this question. It's definitely, I would fully support that NDCs are the key instrument for tackling peatlands, organic soils, wetlands. And there are global analysis which countries actually have taken peatlands in, and these are very few, unfortunately, much less than, for example, blue carbon ecosystems or, of course, forest. So they are still lacking behind, which is very much an issue of awareness or lack of awareness and recognition of their importance. But also a point is the baseline data. Ina was talking about the peatland mapping assessment in Ukraine, which is dating back since 1970s, I think, Soviet times. And since then, of course, a lot of things have happened. Yeah, some of the areas have disappeared because the peat is already gone into the atmosphere. Others have been self-rewetted and are probably not drained anymore and not emitting anymore. So there are a lot of these questions open. And then the second, when this is about the activity data baseline, and then the second one is about the emission factors. We have, of course, IPCC emission factors for different management of organic soils, peatlands, but they are also not regionally adapted to the situation in Ukraine. And that's why I'm very happy that UNDP has decided in their project to work on this very important issue, actually in preparing for including this in a more detailed way, as you said, in the NDCs. And also other countries go the same way. So I know from the NDC partnership that a lot of countries are exchanging on peatland assessments, peatland mapping issues, that on the global level with the Global Peatlands Initiative led by UNEP, there are a lot of activities on that side. So I'm quite optimistic that in the NDCs 3.0, we will see much more peatland and organic soils recognized. Yeah.
Is that working? Yeah. May I also add the role that I think protected areas can play within this space? And it's a model that we have used at Tellus Conservation in countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and the fact that land is government owned, and how that can contribute to this. You know, we've chosen to work with Ukraine's National Park Network for 3 reasons, really. 1 is capability, 2 is scale, and 3 is opportunity. Capability is the fact that we have you know, hundreds of national park staff salaries who are still being paid but don't have an operational budget. And time again, when Ukrainians have been given the tools to do the job, they get the job done. And we've seen that on a local level in the national parks, and then at a national level with how they've you know, really achieved the kind of miracle of being invaded and deterring that. Second one is scale. You have I think 38 protected areas across the country, and yet I believe only I think 11% of the country is actually formally protected. So there's opportunities to increase that percentage to hit the Aichi targets 30 by 30, but also use that increase in protected areas in a financially sustainable way by using market-based instruments under particularly looking at NDC. And then of course the opportunity of how that can play as economic drivers of development in rural areas, which I touched on before. So I think we have the toolkit available you know, as a country to be able to make those commitments, and the fact that it's government land makes sense. It's the cognitive leap that countries in sub-Saharan Africa that have done that we're working with, and Ukraine should follow, I think, that model as well.
And just a very quick comment on the NDCs. NDCs are legally binding as a commitment from the countries, but they are not legally binding for the countries. I mean, like, there is no legal enforcement mechanism that would find the country liable. Exactly. So like, yes, they are legally, yes, right. They're legally binding for the country, but there is no liberated enforcement mechanism that can bring the pledges of the commitments of the country that would really go climate neutral by 2050. I mean, there is no international mechanism for this. Like, and it's a lot would depend on the domestic enforcement like mechanisms that would bring these pledges into action. So I think like NDC, this is a great lighthouse. But again, we should be careful. And of course, we should include into the NDCs, like, and we had this fantastic discussion with Leonardo de Klerk that just escaped, that it's very important to include into the NDCs the warfare-related emissions. And overall, the military emissions are not included around the countries, like anywhere. So like defense emissions, they're not included into the NDCs. And this is the Ukraine, the great loophole. But when we're talking about NDCs, we have to acknowledge, yes, we are legally obliged to promise that we will do that. But the way how we will do this only depends on us.
Just talk about it in our next show fix altogether, about this whole topic.
Any more questions from the floor? Yes, of course.
Could you talk a little bit more about the security imperatives to protect the natural lands and how that mix into our national and international security and stability, both in Ukraine and globally? And maybe from your experiences, particularly, I'm sure you've seen it in different places.
I mean, I don't. Sure. I moved into conservation after serving 8 years as a military officer, and I moved into this space because I was tired of being a junior officer on the ground and seeing us try to deal with security issues that were actually linked to poor environmental management. I think I mentioned earlier, I saw firsthand how a drought in Somalia was used as a recruiting tool for al-Shabaab. I saw how decisions by aid agencies in the 1960s in Helmand province in southern Afghanistan had led to large-scale local ethnic conflict that was being wrapped up as some larger larger war, which actually really stemmed from access to resources. I saw in the West Bank how access to the Jordan River Valley is used as a proxy for the continued occupation of areas of the Golan Heights, which is the watershed. I see now the issues that we're facing across sub-Saharan Africa in our other work linked to the high costs of food that have been a direct result of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. We've all seen how inflation has caused probably issues in Western democracies. I'm not making a huge leap to the recent election results in the US, but time and time again, people were saying it was an economic issue. It was due to the cost of living in the United States and what Trump was saying and how he could resolve that. So I think that Ukraine's environmental protection and the way that we manage its natural resources and protect its ecosystem services to ensure that food can continue to flow will have a direct impact on food security across some of the most unstable parts of the world. I believe 70% of World Food Programme grain comes from Ukraine, or did before the war. And we've seen time and time again how Russia is targeting Ukraine's ability to produce food in a way that it knows will actually cause instability further downstream and cause more costs and more issues for liberal democracies around the world. So this is a security issue at its very core, as far as I'm concerned.
Can I have a small remark to the Alex question? As like, again, coming back to the ecocide issues and the criminal law, I just want to add, like, theoretically, why do we need protect like nature and nature reserves legally? Because like usually non-lawyers are thinking that it's about prosecution when you are when natural parks will be protected by law, then if someone will come, like, I don't know, commit ecocide or something, then this person will be prosecuted, and yeah, great, so we will get the justice, we will get this accountability. But the first and like I guess it's the most important function of law, theoretically, it's prevention. So that is the point. If we have these binding agreements, if we have this like legal protection in criminal law and other, it's not because we want to prosecute. But now, of course, we want to prosecute Russians for this invasion and for what they are committing. But in future, we just want to prevent. So I guess it's also the point of this peace building efforts. Thanks.
Any further questions from the audience? Sure.
Hello, my name is Boris Barov. I'm CEO of Society for Ecological Restoration, Europe. And I'm just curious to ask, after many years of restoring, rewetting peatlands in Ukraine, what is the status of the standards for rewetting? Are there any internationally agreed standards that can provide this security for restoration projects? And how are they applied? I know that the Mikhail Foundation has been working hard on this, so I just want to update myself on the status, please.
Yeah, thanks a lot for this question. Very concrete. And yes, there is development. Last year, the Ramsar Convention published guidelines for ecological restoration of peatlands, which kind of collects all the best practices from around the world. There's a lot on restoration in tropical areas, but also in temperate and boreal areas now summarized. So that is there. And then we are working quite a lot within the Global Peatlands Initiative, together with UNEP, with FAO, with Ramsar Convention, also on the concept of paludiculture, where there's a lot of progress at the moment in many European countries, like in UK, but also in Germany, where really like now private sector businesses get into it, startups who are starting to grow sphagnum mosses, for example, for horticulture. So there's a lot of more knowledge, more publications, and also these guidelines out there. But we can also talk bilaterally afterwards about that.
Thank you. Any further questions? I have a further question. I wonder if our panelists could give us something hopeful and optimistic in terms of what is it that the rest of the world can learn from the huge efforts and momentum that Ukraine has made of protecting and even in some cases restoring its environment, even in the midst of a conflict. You know, it's not hard to imagine that the world is going to become even more insecure and unstable in the years ahead, particularly as the stresses of climate change put more stress on resources and how countries react to those. So I wonder, what can other nations learn from the example that Ukraine has set?
Okay, thank you so much. As already mentioned by Yevgenia, if I'm not mistaken, the will of Ukraine to work on transition, to tackle challenges is really impressive. So we can see the European Union as a really technocratic thing, which is quite helpful when it comes to implementing scientific-based legislation. But this will of acting, political will, and the motivation of the people to implement those measures is impressive. And I think this can also be a best practice example for the European Union, what would be possible if we work on this all together and we are convinced by the targets we are setting ourselves.
Mine is slightly more sentimental, but I think it comes from the bridge of friendship that has been built. When Putin tried to divide us, we all came together. When Putin tried to sort of stop Ukraine thriving, the country innovated out of it. And in that sense, I really believe he's lost, because we wouldn't be sitting here today probably without the invasion. And actually, Ukraine is no longer isolated. It's part of the global community like any other liberal democracy. And the commitments that people have made during the invasion to the country are long lasting. You know, ours is a lifetime commitment. And I see, you know, our ability to get private sector investment in, ironically, as a sort of result of the war. So, you know, I take faith and hope from the commitment from everyone in this room, both Ukrainian and international, to how we continue that bridge of friendship and how we continue to grow together after conflict, after victory, with peace for a prosperous and successful country.
I guess also foreigners, other countries can take from this war hope. So we can take motivation, we can take friendship, and as for me, I think we can take hope. And why I'm telling this in this pavilion, so for those people who didn't have chance to take a look around the pavilion, I would, and for those who are online, I would like to point the corner over there. It's a symbol of renewal. So it is one of the, like now, the most famous in a way, and one of the biggest disaster of the recent decades is the Kakhovka Dam explosion. So it is ecocide, but we can see it also it's not written Kakhovka Dam ecocide. We see it Kakhovka Dam, the symbol of renewal. And it is a hope, because it became a desert when all the water from the dam, from the hydropower plant, it flowed to and made the displacement for 18,000 of people, for several villages and 3 national parks. So it was flooded. But now you can come up after our session here and take a look that now it became a small willow forest. So it's incredible, and it's a point of hope. So all together with motivation and friendship and cooperation, it's a hope.
Yeah, what gives me hope is always also the people from Ukraine, who never give up, who don't want to be dictated by Putin on what they are doing, to do the good, to do the necessary, especially in protected areas, that they are so committed and dedicated to protect and restore nature, to also carry on with, for example, nature education with the children, with the teenagers in the parks, that they don't want to stop this because they know it's good, it's necessary, and we need it for our common future. and also the boost of innovations, which is brought by these challenging times, and which brings up so many new good ideas and so much of joint learnings within European community, and this really gives me hope for a better future.
I will be short, I promise. If Ukraine can do it, any other country can do it. Net zero is peace. Only green and net zero transformations can ensure that no more wars will be. For the previous century, we didn't have any day without the conflict or the war. And once we understand this very close link between our fossil fuel dependence, between our rigid structures not able to respond to the point that, no, old systems don't work. The only possible way, it's to start innovative, green transformative transformations and actions everywhere around the world. Ukraine is really showing the lessons. Learn from Ukraine, be inspired by Ukrainians, and become a little bit more Ukrainian, because we are really strong, but we are strong together. We can't do this alone, but provided you are standing here for Ukraine, sitting in this pavilion, we will all together create all the conditions for the world to be prosperous, secure, safe, and peaceful place.
Thank you, Yevgenia. Ina, do you want to give us some hope and optimism from the ground?
Thank you so much. What gives me the hope and what I took from this discussion as well, this power of synergy. I really believe in the power of synergy, in power of collaborative action. And to be honest, what I experience in pre-war time, it's kind of competition between NGOs, which is working in the same field, for example, in the field of conservation, governmental, non-governmental organization, ministries, etc. But now I clearly see the tendency that people and organization became more friendly, demonstrate more synergy, more collaboration. And I believe this is our future for green recovery and for green rebuilding of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Ina, and thank you to all of our panelists for your words of wisdom and your passion and for educating us. And thank you for the audience for coming here. We hope that you've been somewhat inspired, somewhat educated, learning more about that nexus between rebuilding and restoring nature and ensuring peace. It's been a pleasure to have you, and please come up. I'm sure our panelists will be signing autographs, etc. at the end. Thank you.